If you're going to be a winner, you're going to need a coach.
Sharpening doesn't happen by accident. A blade left untouched will rust, and a man left unchallenged will stagnate. Every man needs friction, resistance, and a whetstone to grind away weakness and reveal his true edge. Welcome to the Whetstone, where we reject comfort, disrupt the status quo, and forge men ready for impact. Hosted by Dread, Dark Helmet, and me, the Plague. This is where men step out of the drift and into acceleration, because iron sharpens iron, and no man sharpens alone. So, socks.
We're back?
We're back. And we're back.
And we're socks.
And we're
not socks.
We're not socks. No,
but
no.
we'll talk about socks.
I'm wearing socks. Are you?
I am as well. And although today they are not from the Mud Gear collection. My daughters every year for Christmas now, and I don't know, I can't remember when it started getting me funny socks, right? But they're not just any random funny socks. Usually they have some sort of meaning to something that we have experienced in the last year together.
That's cool.
So as an example right now, I'm wearing Topo Chico socks because that was a thing like for a long time. Anyway, I'll spare you all the details, right? But I think that the important thing to take away from this little back and forth here, Pax, is that, if you don't have feet, then it doesn't matter what socks you have.
True.
But if you have feet, socks are an important part of your life. It's kind of a thing, right? You got to protect your feet. And if you're the kind of person who goes out in the gloom at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we are, and if you're the kind of guy who thinks to himself, I would like to do CSOPs, mud runs, or, Go Ruck events, Freedom Ops events, whatever the things might be that I want to go do, right? I tend to do a lot of walking, running, and or other foot-related activity during those things. And unfortunately, I've seen many guys who really struggle or really suffer because they did not have the right the gear on their feet. Yep. And we say all the time, and I know it's true where you are in Omaha, right?
Bromaha.
We say Bromaha. Oh, that's right. I forgot. I'm supposed to call it. I'm just going to start calling it Brouhaha. How about that? All right. So in Bromaha, right, there's no such thing as bad weather. There's only bad gear.
Right.
Right?
True. Yeah.
And I would say there's no such thing as a course or an event or whatever that tears up your feet. There's only that you had bad gear. So life is too short to wear crappy socks. I believe that. And so I would, as we have for many weeks now, and will continue to do so, we will raise the flag of approval of Mud Gear socks. They are the official sock sponsor of F3 Nation. And as everyone hopefully knows at this point, all of our, the guy who owns Mud Gear is Malco, and he has run our gear store, the F3 Gear store. Those are separate things. But the F3 Gear store for years does an incredible job of keeping us well outfitted in our regional shirts, in socks. You can get F3 socks now, Mud Gear brand socks. I would just say if you have feet, you deserve to treat them well. And by golly, a Mud Gear sock is the way to do that. Fair?
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And hey, it's June. So Father's Day is coming up. So
that's a good point.
Seems like a good thing to get on that Father's Day wish list.
If guys are willing to tattoo the logo on their body, right, in a permanent fashion,
I know.
Wives, I haven't. Do you really? Do you have an F3? Do you have an F3 tattoo? Oh,
but I know a guy that does.
I know plenty who do. Right. Yeah. And maybe take that down a notch. You don't have to be that much of a fanatic if you don't want. Just leave it on your socks and buy some F3 socks, and or drop a hint of some kind to your significant other and have her get you some socks for Father's Day. Good call.
I love it. So it's been an exciting couple of weeks. F3 Nation board was just in Bromaha. So
Indeed.
Your comment about the no bad weather was good.
My first trip to Bromaha.
Not a bad spot, right? Middle America used to be a flyover state, but I think you're going to be back, right?
Well, I will guarantee that I'll be back. That inevitably, as F3 continues to grow and spread from the middle of the country, there's no question that I'll be back to that area. I will say that the Boise Mountains, where I was a few weeks ago for our SLT retreat, maybe a little more my speed. But no, Bromaha is beautiful. And I will say this, it's not the surroundings that make it. and I'm being really serious when I say this, like it's the men.
Mm.
It's the men and some of the best guys in F3 Nation. I mean, some of them I knew already, but I was really grateful to meet a bunch more and spend some time with them. So it's really, really cool.
Heck yeah.
Including you, Plagoo.
Hey, yeah. Well,
you're taller than I thought, by the way.
Yeah, and my mustache looks better in person, I think is what you said.
I didn't say that.
Nope, you
I
didn't
definitely
say
did not
that,
say that.
Well, I did want to pick your brain on something because, as we're going through all of this stuff and I know maybe I've said this before, but clearly there is a higher power with bigger, better plans than me because as we've been going through,
otherwise I'm
we're
screwed.
Yeah. But I've been leading in sort of a sector Nantan capacity, and the F3 Omaha structure is a little bit different. But
you tried to explain this to me once, and I'll be honest, I still don't think I quite get it.
Yeah, we basically we've like split into multiple regions without splitting into.
You're like non-committal. It's like the Mustang.
Yeah.
It's like like it's not.
But, so long story short, I've been in that role for 4.5 years, and
oh wow,
recently just handed that off, and so it's really brought up kind of some just different feelings. It's a difficult transition. You're sort of like handing off this thing that is in a healthy spot. I'm healthy. I don't have any reason to necessarily hand it off other than this core principle of rotating leadership, right? And I got to thinking, because we also have some leadership transitions going on where I work, and just got to thinking of like how different leadership in F3 really is. Like the fact that the guy who's leading something just says, we're going to rotate leadership because that's what we do. Not like, I'm retiring and going to live in Florida. But I don't know. Talk me through that. Like how or why, or like, I don't know. It's so different than
how or why the way that we do it, or why do we rotate, you mean? Or
just the way like leadership in F3 is so different than corporate.
So
America.
For the engineers, it's the fourth core principle. And so that's why we do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, good. A rule. That's what I was looking for.
Yes, the program, the rule.
Yes, I've got a program.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, and
so
now
the engineers
done with this episode here, folks.
I was going to say the engineers are happy, so you guys can tune out now. It doesn't matter. Now it is interesting, and it is very, and this is, I think, something that is part of just how Dread's made, and so that's part of probably why it sort of grew up this way to begin with. Also, I would say it's how I'm made as well, apparently, because it resonated so strongly that I'm like, I will live my life this way. You know what I mean? And I see many places to apply it in other areas. Even when it is against my best interest, what the world would consider to be my best interest, right? I'm like, well, but it's not for me. Like you guys are playing a different game. We talked about this, several episodes ago, right? Is if you're depending on what your real mission is, and depending on what your real feeling about the world is, and depending on whether you see things as, abundance or scarcity or finite versus infinite, you're going to play the game a whole lot differently, depending on what your worldview is. So I think that for one thing, I will say this: you said it's a little tough, and you kind of have some weird feelings, right? And I think that's very, very common, very normal. I think there's a couple reasons for it. One is if you have served well, and if you've worn yourself out a little bit, and kind of getting something to a certain place and you've maintained it, then if you've served and loved the people that you served, then it's tough to leave. It's tough to hand that off. Of course it is. It's like leaving for college or something. I don't know, right? There's any transition or sort of part of life where you're sort of making and moving on to something else. That's always going to be a little tough. I will say, I also think that just like all men, myself included, there's a little element of, but I built this, but I did this, and I'm particularly bad about it because usually, when we talk about purpose, we say like, why would someone break glass to get to you? That's the metaphor that Dredd used, right? Is, why would you do that? So if someone's going to break glass to get to Frank Schwartz, it's because nothing exists there right now, and they need something to exist there. So I will take it from literally there's nothing there, and I will build it into something where it's highly functional and people are really rallied around it and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, when it comes time to maintain it, you should put Frank back in the box and hand off to someone who can do that, because I can't, and I don't think any of my employers are listening right now, but I'll say it, like, I was brought in, the function did not exist. I've spent 3 years building this function. It's funny, I made a list the other day of just kind of everything that I've done or accomplished in the past 3 years. And some was on my job description. Most, if not all, much of it was not, it was just stuff that I knew needed to get done. And so I built this, right? And now I'm kind of like, well, I get bored easy.
Yeah.
Like it's time for me to move on and go build something else, because that's part of who I am. It's just part of what I'm for, right? So I find it particularly difficult sometimes because, I have that weird feeling like, but I built this and I want it to keep going well. Thankfully, I think in some ways I'm wired to where it's like, yeah, I built it. I don't care who built it. Doesn't matter. It's working right now. Give me the next thing to build. I just want to move on to the next thing because I'm like a Chihuahua off Ritalin or something. I don't know. But so I think there's an element of that's in there as well. I think another element is that it's safe, it's known.
Yeah.
And a guy doesn't, and to your point, it is very countercultural where it's like, that's just not how other people do it.
Right.
The only reason you would vacate a role is if you had, quote unquote, a better role to go to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like if I walked into work on Monday and just told my team, hey, Joe's going to be taking my spot and I'll go fill in for him. They would be like, huh? Like HR, like how does that even work? Can HR even do that? You'll have to make less money,
Yeah, you think about that for a minute, right? No, I'm serious now. Imagine that. Like, what if that was the way that it worked? What if that was it? The idea of when's the right time to hand it off or when's the right time to get out of the way. And I've been saying this, and again, I heard it somewhere from someone smarter than me. When you've run out of vision, it's time to get out of the way.
Yeah.
Like if you recognize you're like, oh, I'm maintaining. Well, there is no maintaining. We know that, right? That's a false arrival. It's a belief that is not true, right? So we go, okay, if I think I'm maintaining, that means I'm probably decelerating this thing, not because I'm ruining it, but because I am now becoming the choke point for the next guy who could take it to the next level. This is what I realized in my business, right? I ran a business for a long, long time, almost 20 years, right? And I got to a point where, and I was trying to follow the advice and trying to do some other things to build it and make myself a big, big guy. And I ignored it. Ignored some good advice and I took some bad advice, whatever, right? So it doesn't work out how you think, but what I noticed for sure, and especially in looking back, like Plague, I ran out of talent is what happened, and I used my usefulness up, and unfortunately I still had too much ego left in it to know that what I should have done was handed it off to the next guy, figured out a way. Now, business is a little different. I get that, whatever, but I easily could have hired the next guy to come in, take over as CEO, and I could have gone on to do something else that I was much better suited to do for that next phase of the company. But I didn't do that. Instead, I almost killed it. Right? Because I was holding on to it too tightly and I was trying to control it and I was trying to, keep it a certain way. And the reason I was doing this because I was terrified of letting it go. Also, I was mostly terrified of letting it go because then I wouldn't know what was happening because I do not understand what these guys would do to make it go to the next level. Right.
Yeah.
So I have to really remove my feelings, my ego, my, all that kind of stuff. So in your case where you're handing it off to, to the next guy to be the whatever made up thing that you are pretending that makes sense in Omaha.
You guys just
can't commit to splitting a region. Just split it already. Yeah. Right? No, I'm like a sub Nantan. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. But when you hand that off, you have some weird feelings, but you also recognize that in order to fulfill the mission of F3 and invigorate male community leadership, you can't just have 10 guys be leaders.
Right. Yeah. Yep. You can't just keep, Well, and one of the interesting things, and it's funny, I think I told you maybe before, I gave 2 different COTs last week that were kind of based on stuff that we've talked about here. One of them was about, the interruptions are the mission and sort of talking about, how many times does my 2.0 come into my office or something, right? And I'm like, well, I got to send this email. And then I'm sort of like, oh, wow, that's not, I don't need to send the email, right? Then the other one, and this is where I do have a question for you on here, because I think maybe this is how it works, but as I was handing off my leadership responsibilities, what I had told to the guys, for a long time I had thought maybe these guys will be my friends because I'm in this position, right? Because I have this title that they'll hang out with me because they kind of have to. But what F3 has taught me, and sort of this realization is like, that's not true. Like there's actually some people that think I'm an okay guy, and that's given me the confidence. Good thing nobody's watching the video. But that's given me some confidence. But what was interesting is like both of those things really made me, and maybe it's because I'm a girl dad, but they made me emotional, right? And sort of just this feeling of like, when you feel empowered to be a man and to lead and to help others lead, like it means a lot. Like it hit me, and I'm even just thinking about it now. But I don't know, like, is that how it's supposed to kind of work? Or I don't know if you've ever been in that scenario.
Yeah, I would say one, there's no supposed to, right? Whatever,
Yeah.
whatever happens, is however it is, right? And that's fine. But you're saying you got a little emotional because you're handing off and because you recognize that these guys care about you because you're you.
Yeah.
And they care about you because you led them. And not because you managed them, because you held some position or whatever, and all that kind of stuff. And it is kind of backwards, because you find it, look, again, you see a lot of people who are yes men.
Mm-hmm.
They're yes men. They look at the boss, the CEO, the leader, or, whatever term you want to throw in there, right? The manager.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, I better kiss up and I better say all the right things, or else I will fall out of favor with this person, and then I won't get mine.
Yeah.
So number one, you're focused on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very F3. That's not how we do things. We don't focus on ourselves. We focus on the other men. Right.
Yeah.
So these guys that are following you, they don't have to.
Yeah.
They don't have to. And so if they're doing it, you think it's because of the position. It's not because of the position.
Right.
Believe me, I see a lot of notes from a lot of guys who really think they should be in charge, and they're more than happy to tell the guy in charge to F off, they don't have to follow you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think in F3, maybe a way to say it, and I've said it this way before, and I keep threatening to write the book, and I maybe have mentioned this, right? Calling it disorganized, the story of a leaderless organization, right? That's sort of the working title.
Yeah.
Because everything that you can think of that a normal company would do, or even a normal organization might do, or that is structured the way that every other organization in the entire world tends to work.
Mm-hmm.
I look at that a lot as Nantan, and I say, well, what's the opposite? And we'll just do that.
Yeah.
So in this case, I don't look for yes men. Honestly, I look for no men. That sounds weird, but you know what I mean.
All men.
Look for no man. No.
All men. Open to all men, but we're looking for no men.
Except the ones that I'm not looking for. Right? No, but what I mean? But I look for guys who are going to disagree with me. Yeah. I look for guys who are going to say no. Mm-hmm. I need that. I called Huckleberry earlier today, and I was like, okay, so I'm having some feelings, and I need you to be the guy to either tell me, no, you have your head up your butt, or yeah, that's actually the way it should be. And so we need to do that. Right. And it was on a culture matter. And that's why I asked him about it, because he's the head of culture for the nation. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think that in itself is counterintuitive. Usually, and what we hear about on the news and what we watch in movies and, what we see in our own experience as we work for corporations or in other organizations, usually what happens is people want to be influential. They want to matter.
Right.
They want to matter. And so the way that they matter is they hook themselves to someone who they believe matters because of their institutional authority.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I hook myself to that, then I will matter. And in F3, it's completely the opposite. It's completely the opposite. I hate to say it, but structurally, I should matter the least. Right. Because I can't tell you what to do in the morning tomorrow when you go out to work out. So in that sense, I matter. I'm the furthest away in some ways, right, from that. So I shouldn't matter at all when it comes to that.
Right.
So if somebody's sucking up to me and being like, well, I just wanted to let you know, I took one of your old wankies and I did the workout. I'd be like, great. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say here. You're like, that's weird.
Yeah.
You're a stalker, maybe. I don't
weird
know,
that you're
right?
telling me that. Yeah.
Right. Because we don't even think about it in F3, because we're not that way. It was don't do that, right. And sucking up to me will get you nothing.
Yeah.
It will get you more to do, maybe, be like, oh,
right.
it's good. You you apparently are really into it. Like, or I will see right through it and I'll be like, I don't want to be around that guy. I don't want anything to do with that guy because it's not honest.
In F3, it's almost like it's kind of like this reverse pyramid or ladder, right? Like in corporate America, I'm climbing the ladder and I get out. The higher up I go, the further out front I get. But in F3, the higher up I go, I go further back, or I don't know.
What? That's interesting. I kind of like that. And let me make sure I kind of understand what you're saying. It's almost like the guy on the ground. So if we talk about it in terms of positional leadership, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the guy on the ground, and some places call them AOQs. We call them site Qs where I am.
Yeah.
But that guy, the guy who's over that site or that AO,
he's
right?
Like the most important guy, right?
Well, I mean, he's certainly the most proximate. And so therefore can have the most influence. If that makes him important, maybe so, right?
Yeah.
But bigger than important, because guys are going to place importance on whatever they're going to place it on, right? Sure. They, some guys place a lot of importance on the fact that they know, Dread, or they know Dark Helmet, or whatever. Right. And that's fine. They can do that. That's, I'm not going to stop them, whatever. That's their business. But that's importance. But I don't necessarily have influence. I'm not there every day. So it doesn't do me any good, right? So important or not important, I don't know. But I will say those guys that actually do the leading, when you talk about like casting vision, articulating that vision, persuading people to come through alongside them and exhorting them through obstacles, right? When you talk about that kind of stuff, I mean, I can do some of that from way over here in Charlotte, but not really. Right. I don't know what's happening in Schmidlap's life because I'm not there, but his site Q is, the guys that show up to work out with him are. So who are the most important leaders? The ones that are right there, the ones that are right next to him, who can say, Schmidlap, you are not looking like yourself lately, bro. Let me help. Because that's leadership. And because that's love.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say in that sense, we are upside down because as a man moves, if he moves from being a site Q to a first FQ or to a whatever else, I almost think you get less and less influence over what's really important and what's really happening. I think then you become more of this sort of cultural leader, kind of like an Antan would be, like a spiritual leader, where you say, hey, you can tell a guy, this is the framework. These are the things that I think are important, or this is maybe a way to look at it, but I don't have any direct influence. Right. And so I can't possibly be viewed as the important leader here. I just think that's very silly in some ways to think about it that way. Right. Is it interesting to have a guy who sort of sits at the head of the thing? Now, if you talk about my SLT, right, I think I am the most important leader to that group because they are the most proximate not in terms of physical proximity, but in terms of, organizational proximity. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the things that I tell them or the things that I influence them to do or say to them or the vision I cast for them is what they take to the next set of guys who takes to the next set of guys, and so on. Right.
Yeah.
But where we get all of our information or try to get all of our information about what we do and how we make the decisions?
Core principles. And
free
to lead.
Yes. We base all of it. Like we bounce it off of that to make sure it's right. But when we start thinking about like, well, what should we do or what sort of direction should we take the nation? Yeah. We look at outside factors and we look at all those sorts of things, but we look mostly at what are we hearing from guys?
Yeah. Yep.
What are we hearing from the site Qs? What are we hearing from the Nantans? That they're saying like, hey, we've got a lot of problems with XYZ thing. How do we fix this? And then we start thinking, well, are there things that we need to be doing at a national level to sort of help that or not?
Yeah.
Or how do we just maintain keeping guys focused on the 5 core principles and tell them not to worry about that kind of stuff,
Right. Right. Yeah. It's interesting as I'm hearing you say that, it makes me wonder, so that proximate, right? The level of influence based on proximity sounds like almost like concentrica, but applied to different relationships or so. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. I see what you're saying, where it's kind of like if I'm going to spin a plate outside of so let's take the relational concentrica of human relationships. If we move that aside and just we admit that that's there and whatever, right? So if we start looking at it as how do we apply that principle in other places? Is that kind of right?
Yeah.
So I think that's useful. A man like myself, right? I hold a certain position, right, within F3 Nation. let's say I'm a Nantan of a region, right? What plates ought I be spinning? Who was my priority then? Well, it would probably be my SLT, because they're going to be the ones that have the next most important influence, or, to those AOQs and site Qs, right? Who are going to have influence over the men. And so in that sense, like, instead of, we see in the world, most guys want to be famous. Can't wait to be famous. So they have a voice. Yeah. They have influence. I mean, our world is glutted with morons calling themselves influencers.
Right.
Because apparently other morons like to listen to morons. I don't know what's going on over there on the TikToks, but I have no interest. I can tell you that. And maybe I'm just a grumpy old man, and that's okay. But
I think you're a Mudgear sock influencer for sure.
I think you can kiss me right in the Mudgear sock. No, but you know what I mean? Like, but you know what I'm saying? Like, so we pretend that that's influence. Yeah. That somehow having a lot of vapid, people watching, or like just because they tune in, that somehow that's influence. And it is influential, I suppose, but that's not the kind of influence that we seek in F3. Right. Because that is people drawing people unto themselves, right? And refashioning the world to make me the most important thing. Influence, as far as we're concerned in F3, is we want to be the least important thing, and we want to amplify and magnify all the people around us so that they can achieve the things that they can in their lives. I would say the same thing that I'm saying right now, whether I had 50,000 people listen to the podcast or if I had 5. It would be the same exact message. You know why? I make $0 more, right? Yeah. Whether I say it or whether I don't say it, whether I say the truth or whether I don't say the truth. Anything I say to placate the crowd or please the crowd or to draw people to be followers of what we're saying means all I'm doing is making it about me. Yeah. And so in a leadership situation, so again, backwards from what the world would tell us that we ought to be doing, because can I tell you how exhausted I am with people talking about personal brand? Well, I've got to elevate my personal brand. Right. Yeah. I don't know why you would want that. Right. I don't know why you would want that. And I'm not being, cute when I say it. Like, I do understand, obviously, the financial benefit that could exist from doing something like that. Right. I get that. I'm not dumb. I know that the more eyeballs I get, the more advertising I can sell. And therefore, the more money I make on the back end. Right. I get that. Right. Understood, and everyone's trying to hack that, that formula so that I'm a YouTube star, or whatever it is. Right. Just let Mr. Beast be Mr. Beast and move on with your life. Right. That's not how you, that's fine for business and whatever, if that's what they want to do, but that is not leading in a virtuous way. That's not what it is. And
just a quick comment on that, right? I think it goes back to something we were talking about before with, it's so tempting to find the perfect program that I can abdicate decision making to, because that type of program will give me feedback that says I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. Yeah. But I can tell you, as a constant chaser of said program, they all end the same way. They all end with a page full of check boxes with checks in them, and you're still feeling like something's missing, right? At least that's been my experience.
It was a Jim Carrey quote. It was something along the lines of, I wish that, or I hope that everyone in the whole world can become rich and famous, so that when they get there, they realize that wasn't it. Yeah. Something like that. Yes. Are you Googling it right now?
You're about spot on. I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of, so they can see that it's not the answer.
There you go. Yeah. Right? Yeah. There you go. You like Jim Carrey, hate Jim Carrey. That's truth. Yeah. That's truth. Because the answers we're looking for are not those things. But that is what the world tells us leadership is. We raise people. There's a song, and now I'm going to really mess it up and forget what it was, but essentially it was like, I remember what it was. It's Megadeth, of all things.
This is on your favorite playlist.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. I listen to it all the time. But that Symphony of Destruction song, and it says basically like you put a man on a platform and watch him become a god, and then can't understand why on earth he's a horrible person. Right. And why he starts wars and why he does all these awful things. Right. Go figure. right? And that's and we're the opposite of that. I mean, the best thing, and Dredd says it all the time, right? The best thing he feels like he did was recognize that he needed to get out of the way, hand it off to another guy, and then teach that guy to do the same thing. And we've done it twice now, right? Yeah. He handed it off to Slaughter. Slaughter did what needed to be done. And after Slaughter was done, he said, I have done what I needed to do. This was the time for which I was here. He said, I think Helmet's the next guy, right? I'm not done. I got a lot to do left. But when that time comes, I'll be saying, I think Plague is the next guy. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Look at him, he's nodding. He's yeah. No, like, whoever that is whoever it is, right? But that's the next step.
Mm-hmm. I think you started talking about influence and influencers, but I guess what I would love to hear your thoughts, like what is influence? What is the real like leadership influence that we are trying to teach guys to have? Talk to us about that a little bit.
I feel like I should consult my Q source to read exactly what it says, but it's in here.
No, like what do you say it is?
But I would say, but in my mind, influence is leadership.
Corporate America teaches me that if I want to lead and have influence, I've got to have a title.
Yes. And then you got to have a title. You got to have,
yeah, we basically we teach you like, well, that's goo nation, right? That's not true. And so then what is the influence that we're teaching guys to have?
I mean, in a kind of, well, not ironically, it's the name of the podcast, right? I think in a true influence kind of a way, like it's one thing to be an influencer, right? And this is going to sound a little weird. I certainly appreciate men who say, oh, Dark Helmet, I really appreciate what you said about whatever, right? There was a newsletter that came out, and guys will write and say like, oh man, I really appreciated what you said about that. And that's great. And I love that. It's wonderful. And I'm glad that something that we're doing, on this side is helping to keep a guy, focused on the right things or whatever. That's wonderful. But that's like you say, that makes me my Mudgear sock influencer, like that. That's what that does. Right. I think real influence is much more intimate than that. I think it's much more proximate than that. I think it's, man to man or man to small group, maybe, because really influencing is helping people see what the advantage looks like, right? So it's leadership, it's disruption of the status quo, and it's doing it in a way that is maybe it's loving disruption. Maybe that's maybe that's a working definition, right? Is loving disruption. It's a way to not just say like, come in and break stuff and be like, I've now disrupted you, right? But it's more of to look at a man to see what he can be, to see the good that he can do in his life, to see what his potential is, and then coming alongside him and saying, hey, I need you to not stay where you are.
Yeah.
You need you to not stay where you are. Your wife needs you to not stay where you are. And so I'm going to influence you to change. I'm going to influence you to seek advantage in your life and make some changes.
That reminds me of a question I was running with a guy this morning, and we were talking about Q source, and he sort of was like, yeah, but then there's like the correction and the targeting topics that kind of seem like you're forcing things on guys. Talk me through that a little bit, like because I think when you just added the word love in front of disruption, that changes a little bit the picture.
Well, and I know it says it in there, and we talk about it all the time, and I think it's just a truism, right? And that is that anything you do that the world might say is leadership, right? Or that even you might think is leading, or whatever. If it is done without love, then it is not leadership. It just isn't. It's something else. And it may still be beneficial to someone. It may still be positive. Like if I get you to quit smoking because I yelled at you enough to get you to quit smoking, there's still a positive outcome. Yeah. Right. So it's not a matter of whether or not there's a positive outcome. The trick is, but where did I leave you? Do you hate yourself now? But you don't smoke, so who cares? Right. I got my job done.
I won.
Which is, right? Finite,
Sure.
right? I got you to quit smoking, but now you think you're a piece of crap or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what did I really win? Or did I come alongside you and instead of saying quit smoking, you're terrible, you know, and you're ruining your life and, you know, whatever. Or if I just kept saying to you, Plague, buddy, there's so much potential in you. You would be unstoppable if you would remove some of these barriers that you put in front of yourself.
Yeah.
Right? That's influence.
Yeah.
Because it's love.
Right.
It's also horrifyingly disruptive.
Right.
Right? I'm telling you to change everything about your life because you suck. But I'm not telling you suck. I'm telling you, I know who you can be. I know what you're for. The Lord has told me. Right? I know it. I've seen it. Because I know, and not just because it's you and, you know, we have a relationship, you know, you and I, but I know what men are for.
Right.
I know what their potential is. I know, because you know why? I lived it.
Right.
I am it. I was a certain way and I am now a different way.
Right.
Right. We love a was now story about guys who lose weight, and that's great. I lost 50, you know, in that neighborhood. Right. I look and feel way better than when I started this deal. You know, I'm hovering just under 195. I was easily at 250 when I started. Right. And I didn't get shorter. So I was whiter. Right. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a great was now, but the real was now for me is not that I lost weight, although that was great and important. And I think it's, you know, obviously improved my health and, you know, hopefully my longevity and my, you know, I'll be with my wife and my kids longer. Right. But the real was now is I was a guy who never thought he was worth much, who always thought he fell short at everything. I was a guy who never believed he was good enough for nothing, no matter how much I tried, no matter how much good I was actually even doing. And now I'm a guy who struggles with that a lot less.
Right.
I don't want to say zero, you know, but I don't think about it very often.
Right.
You know, it's not part of my everyday. You know, I'm not finding ways to hide from myself because, you know, because I just don't, you know, I believed all the stories that I had told myself in my head or the crap that my dad had told me or, you know, I can still remember, you know, coaches and principals and everybody else. I would take these standardized tests, Plague, and they'd be like, he's so smart. He's just not living up to his potential. Right. Because they thought my grades should be better. They never considered for a second that maybe their system is stupid. Right. And just didn't make sense to someone like me. You know, I'm not ashamed to say, like, I did okay in college. I did fine, you know, mostly B's and A's, you know, and I failed chemistry once, but that's neither here nor there. I have to tell you a story.
You're not a chemist.
Right. Exactly. But you know, I was never a good student because I just couldn't understand the system. I didn't get it. You know, I got, okay, you want me to have knowledge? Fine. So I would take your test and I would do fine on your test, but I understand why I needed to do homework. And I certainly didn't need to understand why I needed to be judged on it. You know, like why you need to, you know, rake me over the coals about whether or not I had I got the right answer when it mattered. Right. So they never considered that maybe their system was stupid, but my point in saying that is just that I was that guy. That was my life. That is what I believed. And, you know, that's my jester.
Yeah.
Right. It lingers there all the time. And I constantly have to be aware and conscious of it and, you know, do the things, put the bricks down every day so that I don't go driving off the cliff. It's hard.
You know, and it's really cool to hear that story, right? I think that's one of the things I wish we did better in F3 is like, you know, because in corporate world, you know more about the CEO than you probably want to know, right?
Personally, I do, yes.
But sometimes in F3, we don't get to hear the was now story of our Nantan. But I'm curious if you have experienced, do you have those was now moments like with fitness fellowship and faith, or do you have them?
Oh, sure.
Like how does that work, or what's that been like for you?
You mean kind of like viewing how I was versus how I am?
Yeah, like
in those specific areas, or
yeah, and it's almost like you know, because I see a lot of guys, they have the fitness was now, right? And they're like, oh, I lost.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
And then they sort of have a like, oh, I'm accepted and I belong to this group of men. Yeah, I don't know. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, so it's kind of like where in maybe in those three categories or in those three areas or maybe in any areas, like what have been some of those big major changes kind of a thing? Yeah. It's funny because fitness it's the easiest one. We talk about how hard we work out and all this kind of stuff. And we do, that's fine. Right. But it's really the easy one. And it's visible, and I think, kind of like, if you're familiar at all with Dave Ramsey, the financial guy, right? Yeah. And he says, to get out of debt, you do this snowball deal, right? And you don't pay the one with the highest interest rate necessarily, right? You pay the one with the smallest balance. You get that paid off first, then you move to the next one. And you do it in size of balance versus interest rate. You're like, well, I'll save more money if I pay the interest rate one off. On paper, yes, but that does not take into account the human side of it. The momentum that I gain from paying off the small one and feeling accomplished on doing that carries me over to pay the next one off faster, and so on and so on and so on. And so there's an element of it that's psychologically baked in there, right? Yeah. And I think it's similar in that sense.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, it's easy to say, okay, the fitness one's easy. Like we got that, but it's not because it's that much easier, but since we get some quick wins there, we can use that momentum to gain other ground in other places.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
And so for me, I mean, lost the weight. Sure. It turns out, as I run almost as fast under weight as I do not. Like, apparently I have one speed. It's not terribly fast.
That's okay,
but you can pack some crap on there and it works out.
Right,
So like we got this thing coming up called the Tortoise and the Hare. It's a pretty cool CSOP that we do in our region. And I think the track that we use it's a bus lane, or a car rider lane in front of an elementary school, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's quite 400 meters. It's probably about 300, 350, something like that, right? So it's a little shorter than a full lap on the track. And there's just a little bit of a hill, and then you kind of come down the other side. And what you do is you get a 4-man team. Some guys can do it too. And you run essentially, I think last year it was a half marathon. I don't remember how many they're doing this time. But you run one lap with one guy wears a ruck, and he runs a lap. Then one guy just runs, right? And then the next guy runs with a ruck, and then the next guy runs. So you have a ruck lap and a run lap, and you just alternate back and forth. And so, you try and find a guy who's fast underweight, then you try and find a guy who's just fast, right? Mm-hmm. And get those guys to, pair up and be on the team. So I say that just to say, I can't remember why I said that, but it felt like it was important.
Are you normally the tortoise or the hare in this?
Oh, I'm definitely, put the ruck on me and I'll outrun the guy that's just running. That's fine. Because, I can't, but I don't know why it's like that. But so I'm definitely the tortoise, hashtag Clydesdale, hashtag fat kid waiting to happen.
Yeah.
But I think I say that because we can see gains, in our first F and I'm much, much more healthy and I'm much faster and I'm much stronger, all of those things than when I started F3. Easy. Mm-hmm. The second F was a little tougher, just because it's the next thing and it's not visible. Yep. It's not as binary, it's not as tangible. Right. Mm-hmm. But I just spoke in church a few weeks ago and talked about 2 a.m. friends. Mm, yeah. Those guys that you would call. Right. And I have those now. And even though I was always pretty well friended, I don't know if you know, and some guys don't, but I'm an extrovert. Oh, yeah. I don't know if that's obvious. That's odd.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, never would have guessed, right? And so, I was never short on friends or people that were around for sure, right? But I don't know how many guys I would have called at 2 a.m. where I would have known. I wouldn't even have to say what was wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I guarantee you I could do the fire drill right now at 1600 hours on Thursday, that I could do it. Yeah. No questions asked. I could say, I need you here right now. And they may or may not hang on the phone long enough to find out what's going on. Or they might just say, I'll be there in 15. Mm-hmm. Do I need to bring anything? And that would be the full discussion. Right. I am 100%. You could not convince me otherwise. I know that would happen if provided they were in town, right?
Sure.
They're flying across the country a little tougher, right? Yeah. But even then it would be, I'm across the country. Tell me what is going on and let's fix this right now. Right. And so you evolve to where you have those kinds of friends. And then in a third F sense, man, that is I was a guy who was doing all the things. And in our faith, people talk all the time and kind of make fun of us sometimes about how over involved we are. you know, and it's like, well, you go to church on Sunday for 3 hours. Right. And then you have stuff during the week, and then you have this, and then, and so on and so on and so on, you know, right. And so we get made fun of sometimes. And a lot of people love to, even though it's not accurate, they love to tell us how we are a works-based faith. And so they're like, you're always doing stuff, you know, because you think you can earn your way to heaven or something. Well, that's A, preposterous, but B, you know, I understand why a person could say that about us.
Sure.
My point in saying that is just that I was doing a lot of things, right? I was doing all there was to do. You know, all that was asked of me and all that kind of stuff. And yet I feel like the relationship that I had with God is infinitely better now. Part of that's because of the changes I've made to myself.
Yeah.
Part of that's from being in community of men of faith, right? Of whatever their faith might be. And, you know, we've talked about it on here before, right? I am not of the same denomination as other guys. Right. Okay. You know, but what I gain from their faithfulness to their beliefs has radically transformed, you know, the way that I am and what I do and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's bananas to think about, you know, the difference.
What, can you think of anything specific, maybe that guys that are maybe newer to F3 or kind of get started, like if they're coming, you know, maybe they've lost a bunch of weight and they're sort of looking for, you know, okay, now I'm ready to have friends. I find myself, I think maybe it's just me, but like guys
should happen all at once. Like all these things should be happening in parallel, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, no, that's so, and this is a question asking for the program again. So I won't be surprised if you say there isn't a program, but how does a guy like start that? Right. Because it's so easy, right? If I'm going to do the fitness thing, I just show up to a workout and do what everybody else is doing. But is it the same in F3 with fellowship?
Yeah, I really hope that in your region, wherever you are, PAX, that they're doing cafeteria. I really hope that they are. In fact, I would love it if you took the sort of the example of much of Middle America. I don't know if they do it exactly, you know, at every single one in Omaha.
Every day.
I think
is
it everyone?
Workout.
Okay. Yeah. I thought so.
Yep.
I mean, we weren't there the whole time, so I didn't, you know, but we did after the ones where we were, right? Yep. You know, there's some places that do parking lot coffee, PLC, you know, every single work. They have coffee queues in their workouts.
No, that's a new one.
At their AO, right? And it's like, that's the guy in charge of coffee.
That's great.
Well, look, I know it doesn't show up on the official list of, oh, wait, there's no official list.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, hopefully guys should just reach out to you if they want a coffee queue in their region, right?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Cause I'm a connoisseur, being as I don't drink it at all. So I'm definitely the guy to ask about coffee.
Well, no, for approval, right? You've got to approve.
Oh yeah. Well, naturally.
Coffee.
Yes. I have reserved the right to personally approve and interview every single coffee queue for all of F3 Nation.
You like coffee? No, you're out.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. Sorry.
I don't even know. Right. But to your point, right? Certain leaders, that would be the thing. I heard a story recently, certainly not at my company where I work, but it could be happening
somewhere.
The CEO could have been walking the floor and gone into someone's office, gone into not just one person, apparently, people's offices who working with their overhead lights off, right? Because that's just how they prefer to work. Like they don't like the you know, the buzz and the horrible fluorescent light or whatever. Yeah. And he's walking in their office and he turns the lights on. He's like, you can't work. You can't be productive in the dark. Turn the lights on. Now, why is the CEO even worried or care? I mean, why? What? Wow. Right? Yeah. That's a level of micromanage that I've been previously unfamiliar with. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So yes, I will approve every coffee queue. Absolutely. Yeah. But my point in saying that is, you know, that it should all be happening kind of in parallel, because my hope is that every AO in F3 Nation is having parking lot coffee. I think that'd be amazing, because then it's just natural. I'll tell you what happened to me. Right? I showed up to a workout. It was a Friday. And I'd worked out with these guys. I'm still early into F3. I just barely started coming during the week at all. This particular Friday is a moderate, you know, it's designed to be that way. And I was, you know, since I was still kind of new and still kind of fat, you know, I was trying to, you know, I was trying to take it easy. I was trying to get in there, but man, it was tough. Right. And I remember standing around afterward, watching guys go into the Chick-fil-A. And I was like, I don't really know. Is this like for everybody? Yeah, like I didn't know what to do, and so I just kind of tapped the guy on the shoulder, who I'll just tell you his F3 name is Jekyll. He's a dear friend. His last name is Hyde.
Nice.
So yeah,
that's a good name.
It's a good one. It's he has actually the guy that gave me Dark Helmet. Come to think of it,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
So he was like, Schwartz, I know your name. And I said, hey man, so kind of what happens now? And he was like, oh, come with me.
Mm-hmm.
And we went into the Chick-fil-A. Turns out it was their Friday morning Bible study. Now, that's not something that I was super into.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something I think he had ever gone to. And I know that he hasn't gone to very many since, right? Some from those many, many years ago. But that wasn't the point. The point was not to go to the Bible study. The point was he said, oh, a guy doesn't know what happens now. And not only will I tell him, I'm going to take him. Right. So that's when I think you start seeing some of those changes in that second F, right? So a guy who's new, look, if you're waiting for everybody to give it to you, and tell you what to do next, you're in the wrong spot. Sorry. At some point along this road, you're going to realize that your job is to take charge of everything in your life. Mm-hmm. Nothing happens to you anymore as an F3 man. You happen to things. You are now an act. You are not an acted upon. That's just not how it works. So you're going to have to take responsibility. You're going to have to jump in and say, hey, I need this, or hey, I want that. The fact that I have 2 a.m. friends is an intentional, it did not just accidentally happen. It was something that we did on purpose to make these things happen, to develop the relationship so that it would be like that. You know what I mean? Like it's not, there's no accident in there.
And, a little bit of a, not full circle, but the reason you knew you wanted those things was because did other guys tell you out of love that you might need them, or is that kind of how you?
Oh, well, for sure. Right. Yeah. And so, all right, Plague, hold tight. You ready? Mm-hmm. Here's the program.
Yes. I knew we'd get there. It's only 12 episodes in. But
right. Yeah, exactly. It's like, I knew it. No, the program is relax. That's the first step of the program is relax. Quit trying to make it into a thing that it's not. Just take it easy. It'll happen. The second thing is, so don't force it. Right. The second thing is like, yes, you need men around you who will tell you that you are wrong. Mm-hmm. Right. Again, we're just kind of coming back to what you had started with, which was we seem to do everything opposite and backwards from what the world tells you how to do or how it acts anyway. So you need men around you who will tell you that you're wrong. And I think you have to intentionally seek those guys out. Yeah. And so as you intentionally seek those guys out and as you seek to develop those fellowship, those relationships, right. And you find yourself a good mentor and you get yourself a strong shield lock, then these things start to happen. They start to build that way. So the program, if you will, is know what the principles are and start applying them. Just start doing things. We've talked about this, right? Yeah. We're like, just get in there. I've been through so many shield lock iterations, and I may still, I don't know. I don't think so. I think I'm pretty solid. I keep dragging poor Maximus with me everywhere. Like we've been through a few. Poor guy. But that's we figure it out. We figure it out. But I think that the trick is to get in there and get working and start doing things. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Yeah. Helmet, as we're kind of wrapping up a little bit, I think one question I would have for you, because I know I've struggled with this, right? So if I'm in F3 and I'm maybe in a leadership role in F3 and I see how amazing it like functions because it's disorganized.
Well, I'm sorry, you're in a F3 leadership position and it functions amazingly?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Yeah. Don't go ahead.
And I'm sort of like, in a corporate leadership position and I'm like, why is this so hard? And sort of caught in that tension of like, things are, in my experience, like you can give feedback easier in F3. You rotate leadership, so there's no awkward, like, I wonder if that guy's going to get promoted or when, if that guy's going to retire soon so I can move up the ladder or whatever. Like, how do you navigate if you're a guy we're sort of in the middle, right? Because not everything we do in F3 can be maybe it can be. I don't know. Talk me through that. It
sure as heck doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we give a guy here. All right, here's how I'll say it. Here's a couple things. Number one, every man needs a few things, right? In F3, I think every man needs love, right? I think he needs support and education. He needs to be taught the leadership principles, right? And then he needs to be given opportunities, right? We talk about it all the time, right?
Yeah.
Schooling, right? Apprenticeship, opportunity, failure. So he needs to go through, like, that's the LDP. That's the leadership development process.
Yeah.
So every man needs those things. He needs to be given a responsibility, or he needs to figure out what he's going to be responsible for and go do it. So there's kind of two pieces in F3, right? There's the sua sponte side, where it's like, I see this as a need, so I'm just going to go do it. And now some guys get confused and they say it's a need when really it's just a thing they want to do and they want to go do it. Yeah. That's okay too. But unless you've convinced other men to come alongside you and you're fulfilling a noble purpose, then you're just doing a thing you want to do. Nothing wrong with that. You just need to admit to yourself that's what you're doing.
Right.
Like guys who are like, I think we need a gear AO on this side of town. Well, that's just because you like gear and you live on that side of town.
Yeah. So, you're
Now, if you say to yourself, I think men on this side of town need to become stronger, and therefore we will have a gear AO and I will lead it, and I will, that might be something, right? But you just drag out a bunch of crap into a parking lot and being like, hey guys, you want to go pick up a bunch of crap? Like, no offense, but that's how most of these, a lot of these things start. And then they can't figure out why they can't inspire guys to come to their workout. I mean, well, you're not leading.
Right.
You're just,
you weren't leading the group toward impact, right?
Right. Yeah. Toward advantage. Like you're just doing something. But I watched Field of Dreams. If I build it, they'll come. I mean, first of all, I don't know if you know, that was fiction. Right.
Wait.
Those baseball players weren't real. They didn't come out of the cornfield.
Hey, speak for yourself. I live in Middle America where we have.
Okay, fair. I understand. And dead baseball players come out all the time. I know, but so guys think, oh, well, I'm just going to do a thing and then I'm a leader. No, either you see an advantage for the group, you lead someone to that advantage because you love them, or you're kind of wasting your time. So there's one piece there, right? There's a thing that every man in F3 needs, is he's got to have some sort of responsibility. Then he needs to be needed. He needs to be significant. He needs to matter to the group. And there's lots of ways to do that. Now, some guys sort of take on informal, unofficial roles, right? There are guys, you probably have them. I don't remember if I met one that I felt like it was that was him, but you got some guy who has dubbed himself the Foreign Police. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah. He's
more or less.
We gave him a first FQ title, but I think
Sure. But if he didn't have that title, would he still be doing the same thing?
Yes.
Yeah. He'd still be telling you that you suck at Merkins and your burpees are not, whatever. Right? I mean, that's what he would be doing. Go lower on your squat. Yeah. Right. And that's what he would be doing because he can't help himself. So you take a guy, he's got to have a responsibility. Some guys give themselves the responsibility and sort of take on these roles, right? Of whatever it might be. But here's the thing that I think that is very counterintuitive. It's very countercultural. And I think it is the heart and soul, in my mind, of what F3 leadership ought to be. And I think we give each other titles partially because it helps with structure, and it's good to have, some place to point when you have a question or, you need something done, right? And so that's fine. We'll give you a title. We'll say that you're in charge of it. But ultimately, you have to decide you're in charge of it. I can give you the title all day, but you still have to do the work and you still have to lead the thing, right? And so the title really is not that important, but it helps, because then it's like it reminds me that that's my duty and I've agreed to do these certain kinds of things, and whatever, right? Yeah. So that's fine. But really, in the big game, Plague, my responsibility, the job I have in F3. Literally, guys are going to push back on this. I can feel it already as I say it, but I mean it as sure as I'm sitting here. My responsibility in my sphere of influence is literally no more important than any site Q in F3 Nation and the importance that he has to lead in his sphere of influence. We may have slightly different scope, right? But it is no less important. It can't be. I would contend, just like we said before, my influence is probably less important to what happens on the ground in any given parking lot on any given Wednesday, right? Than the guy who is there, period. Yeah. And that is upside down. And so you also have to remember that because my title doesn't matter, because that is not relevant, wherever I sit. So if tomorrow, and they could, I don't think they will, but I think the board meeting went pretty well. I think I probably have a job for a little while longer, right? Right. But if the board tomorrow, it is their right. This is how it's written in the F3 bylaws, right? On paper, because there has to be someone who is the CEO, who is the, on paper, that person, right?
Yeah.
So if the board tomorrow said, hey, you're done, it's over, thanks, and they put somebody else in there, okay, well then all I do is look and go, well, all right, well then what's my next thing?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'll just go do something else to support the mission and support the nation.
Yeah.
And so if today you're a Nantan, because I'll tell you something we see a lot, Plague. We see this a lot, and it's a concern that I have, and it's something that we're trying to solve at the nation level. Guys who come in, they're excited, they take on some leadership role, they have a leadership role, and maybe they get quote unquote promoted, which is backwards, wrong, right? It's not promotion. It's just you're now given a larger sphere of influence to do the same things, right? To lead.
Right.
You have a little bit different scope, right? But it's no different. But so he'll do that, and then maybe I was a first FQ, and then maybe he becomes the Nantan, right? Or maybe he becomes some sort of weird, I can't split my region sector tan or whatever, right? Yeah. And then he becomes, whatever, right? So he does these things, and then he's like, oh, well, what's next? Oh, there's an area queue. There's no area queue position open, okay? You're not getting paid anyway, right? There's no, oh, I got promoted to sector queue, and now what's my next step? Oh, I have to become the Nantan. If I don't win the Nantan title of the nation, then I guess I quit F3. Because there's no point to me. I'm not useful anymore. And what guys have to remember, like, you are released from your duty that was of those specific tasks and obligations that were tied to that role. Mm-hmm. But that's the only thing that you're released from.
Right.
You're not released from your duty as a man, and you're certainly not released from your obligation as a leader.
Right.
So if you are the Nantan and you stop being Nantan, some of those guys just drop off into nowhere. They stop working out and everything, Plague. It's terrible. When what they ought to be doing is recognizing, going, oh, I climbed the mountain, only to find, like Jim Carrey said, that wasn't it. Mm-hmm. And so now I need to go down the mountain and tell the next guy.
Right. And
that's your job forever, is to keep going down the mountain.
Something that I remember being really cool when I first started F3, and how fitting, right? That in F3, we give you an opportunity to experience sort of leadership turnover, right? But when I first started, I remember wait time was in sort of a C-suite position. So like, here I am working out with this guy who's like,
he's a big executive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big guy. And he transitioned out of the organization or got let go. And I remember seeing him at a workout, and he was sort of like he was fine. And I remember being like,
shouldn't you be devastated right now?
Yeah. He's like, how are you not completely devastated, right? And I just remember learning from him that like, it's just a job, right? It was a job and a title, and now I'm trying to figure out what my next thing is, right?
Because if I am a man with a mission, a personal mission, a man who knows his personal purpose, as we've said many times before, and we'll say many times hereafter, you always know what you're supposed to do wherever you are. My mission in life is not going to change. The position I hold will change. The sphere of influence I have, or the scope of my role will change. Any number of things in that arena will change. The thing that will not change is why I am here, what I am for. And I will always just do that, period. And if I have no position, I'll make one up. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
That's what I told the guy I handed off to is I am now officially the PowerPoint Q because I just love PowerPoint.
Yeah. You got dropped on your head as a kid or something, clearly, and that's fine. But like, whatever it is. Right. But that's the thing. I joke all the time at church because like we have these organs, like we're an organ church, right?
Yeah.
And, some people play the organ. Well, lots of people don't. And these organs, they're modern, they play themselves. Like you can just pick which hymn it is and poke a button and it'll play. Right. So I joke all the time. I'm like, that's the job I want. Yeah. I want to be the organist. Like that would be the man, because then I have one job. I poke a thing, I'm done. And then I can go do whatever I want with no one telling me I can't, be like, there's no responsibility. I don't have any, real tie down. Right. So yeah, I'm going to be the organist. That's what I'm going to do. Cause I'll make up something. It doesn't matter because leading is now part of who I am. Not because I was born, as some kind of genius, whatever, although that is true. But add to that, right? I've just learned. I've been conditioned. I can't do it. I couldn't stop doing it now if I wanted to, because it has become such a part of who I am.
Yeah.
And I think that's the goal.
I love it. And it's so cool to just kind of talk through like how F3 and the things we get to do in F3 just give us more opportunity. Like you said, every guy needs those opportunities, or just steward the LDP for the rest of our life. It's just really cool. You know, I know you kind of mentioned that you love Boise because they have mountains, and you were also talking about just climbing mountains. And for me, there really ain't no mountain high enough. There ain't no valley low enough. There ain't no river wide enough. If you need me, call me, no matter where you are, no matter how far. Don't worry, baby. Just call my name.
That means a lot that you would say that.
Yeah, just call me. Appreciate
not
you,
Geddy Lee.
Yeah, not Geddy Lee.
It's calling me sharp, stone on steel in the darkest spots. Warning weather, still it cries. Whetstone whispers through my mind. Spin that song.